So let us start with a recap. So, uh, so yesterday we started our discussion about with very special kind of relations, okay, and the special relation that we started off was actually something called a pre-order, or it's also sometimes known as a Cauchy order, right? Anyone recalls what is a pre-order or a Cauchy order? Yes. Just a refresher. What is a pre-order or a Cauchy order? When do we say a relation R on a set, say A is a pre-order or a Cauchy order? What are the properties that it should satisfy? Yes, class, what are the properties? Excellent. It should be reflexive and transitive, right? If any relation satisfies these two properties, it is said to be a pre-order, right? And then very closely related to pre-order is something called a strict pre-order, wherein you don't consider the equality, and as a result you consider those relations which are irreflexive and transitive, right? And then we saw pre-order actually subsedes what we have already studied known as partial order, right? Because partial order is something wherein not only the relation needs to be reflexive, transitive, but it also needs to be anti-symmetric, right? And at the same level, if a relation is reflexive, symmetric, and transitive, what is such kind of relation known as? If you have all the three properties, but instead of anti-symmetric you have a symmetric part, then the relation is known as equivalence relation, right? So this was pre-order and partial order. Then what we discussed is why this is known as partial order. The reason behind that is because if we look at all the ordered pairs under this partial order relation, it's not necessary that for all the elements will be related to each other. By related I mean either they subseed each other or they precede each other, okay? It's not possible under partial order. There is no guarantee that all the elements, all possible pairs will be related under this relation, okay? That's why it's partial. Now when we generalize it and we give a surety that all elements will be related to every other element in this relation, such a kind of order is known as a total order or a linear order. Okay, so total order or linear order is nothing different, but it is a special case of partial order wherein all possible elements are related to each other, right? Like we gave an example yesterday. So suppose instead of considering the full natural set, I just consider say 2, 4, 8, 12, and another set which is 2, 4, 8, 16. Okay, and I define the relation as divisibility. Okay, then which of the relations will be a total order? The relation R1 or R2? Both are divisibility, but one is defined on set A and other on set B. Which one will be a total order? Recall, as I said, total order means all possible pairs should be related to each other, right? Very good, Ankita. It is R2. Why? Because in R1 the problem is 8 does not divide 12. So even if you find one pair which is not comparable, then it's not a total order, it is a partial order. But if you look in this, all possible elements divide the numbers, right? You have 4 divides 8, 4 divides 16, 8 divides 16. So all possible pairs are related, right? So such kind of relation is known as total order, where all possible pairs are related, right? Then the last function or last order that we saw in this was something called a well order or well ordered set, set on which it is defined. Okay, well order was again a special case of partial order where the relation is a total ordering, but the additional condition was that every non-empty subset should have at least least element. Okay, it should have the least element, every subset that you consider. Okay, and every is important. So these were the relations. You have first pre-order. Pre-order builds onto a partial order. Partial order with special properties becomes total order, and then total order with this special property that every non-empty set has a least element becomes well order. right? That's what we discussed yesterday. And we also discussed one more special kind of order called a lexicographic order, or sometimes also known as a dictionary order. Wherein what we have, we define a relation on Cartesian product. It could be a product of two or in general n. And there we say, suppose there are two ordered pairs A, B and A prime, B prime. We say that they are under a lexicographic order if the first element satisfies this, that is A is dominated by A prime, or if the first few elements are same, then at least the last element should satisfy, or some element should satisfy this dominance relation, right? And there we saw the example of words in dictionary, right? So if your first word itself dominates, okay, suppose I have a word starting with D and other word starting with Z, so we know D is dominated by Z, so it's naturally a lexicographic order, right? But if suppose some of my words are same, then the first one, which is different, that should at least dominate it. Okay, only then we say it's a lexicographic order, right? So that was all we studied about orders. After that, what we started was something called a pictorial representation of partial sets, what are known as Hasse diagrams. Okay, so what is a Hasse diagram? Hasse diagram is nothing but a simple pictorial representation of a partially ordered set, or what we say as a poset, right? And how do you make it? To make a Hasse diagram, you first consider the directed graph of that relation. Okay. After that, what you do, you remove all the reflexive pairs, because partially ordered set it will be a reflexive relation. So you remove all reflexive pairs, which in the graph will be like self loops. Then third step is remove all transitive pairs. So any transitive pair, AB in R, BC in R, means the transitive pair is AC in R. Remove all these pairs. Okay. And finally, what you have to do, you have to arrange the resultant graph in such a way that all arrows point upwards. Okay, because by default, Hasse diagrams have all the arrows pointing upwards. Okay, and as a result, the resultant diagram is known as your Hasse diagram, right? And we saw a couple of examples of how to make a Hasse diagram. The last thing that we discussed in yesterday's lecture were some special definitions in context of Hasse diagrams. The first pair of definition was maximal and minimal element. Okay, so what is a maximal element? Maximal element of a poset, or in general a Hasse diagram, is that element which does not have any other element above it. Okay, so in terms of Hasse diagram, any element which does not have any arrow up above it, it's known as the maximal element. Similarly, minimal element is that element which does not have any element below it. Okay, so in general, we found using different examples that it is possible for a relation to have multiple maximal and minimal elements, right? So then we move to something called the last or greatest and first or the least element. Okay, what is the first or the last element? So last element is that element above which there is no other element. Okay, but every element, for every A that belongs to that set on which the relation is defined, this last element, say it's X, it should always dominate it. That is, there should be no multiple elements, or there should be no element in the set which is not dominated by the given element. Okay, same vice versa definition holds for the last element. Okay, so in general, basically, if I say you I have a relation R and it has a unique maximal and minimal element, what can you say about the last and first element? Can you guarantee that that exists? If I give you a relation R and I claim that the relation has a unique maximal and minimal element. Can you say something about the first and last element? Because in general you cannot otherwise say. For some relations there can be this first and last element can exist, and for some it may not exist, right? But if I tell you that the relation has a unique maximal and minimal element, then can you say something about the first and last element? What can you say about it, Dhananjay? What will this last and first element be? You are correct, we can say about it. Yeah, so basically, if the maximal and minimal element is unique, then it itself is the first and last element, right? Because in general, we can have multiple maximal and minimal elements, but if there's just unique, then that itself is the first and last element, right? So let me just go back to some of those diagrams so that we just recap it carefully. Okay, so let us see this example for just a revision. So you can see here you have one minimal element and three maximal elements, right? But if I ask you what is the least element, since the minimal element is unique, so definitely the least element is same as your minimal element, right? But if I ask you what is the greatest element in this case, is there a greatest element in this? No. Why? Because B, C, and D are they have they don't supersede each other, right? So the maximal element is not unique. So greatest element does not exist. Okay. So in general, maximal and minimal elements will always exist, and they can be one or more than one. But least and the greatest element will always be a unique number. Okay. If that exists, it will always be a unique one, like we have in this case, right? Is this clear? Because this needs to be clear, because what we are going to study today is going to be some extensions of it. Okay, any questions on this so far? This is what we had discussed yesterday, nothing new uh, so far. Is this clear to everyone? Yes, class, any questions here? Class, say yes or no. Okay, great. So what we are going to discuss today are some more versions of this least and greatest element. Okay, and after that, hopefully we'll start with the functions. Okay, so let us start. Okay, so what the next quantity that we discuss about these Hasse diagrams or the partially ordered relations is something called a upper bound and a lower bound. Okay, so how are these upper bound and lower bounds defined? So often what you do is you have an element, right? You instead of considering the full set, you consider subset of that set. Okay, so suppose you have relation defined on A. Instead of considering full A, you consider a subset of A. Okay, and then what you try to find out, you try to find out an element which is greater than or equal to all elements of that subset. Okay, and this is very important. Two things are important here. Those set of elements which are greater than or equal to, so equal to is a tricky one, and all elements. Okay, so those set of elements which are greater than or equal to all elements in that subset, such kind of elements are known as upper bound of A. Okay, such kind of elements are known as upper bound of that subset. Okay, similarly, all the elements which are less than or equal to all elements in the set are known as lower bound on it. Okay, so 2 points to keep in mind. Greater and lower is obvious from upper bound and lower bound, but two things that you need to keep in mind is you also consider equal condition in both, and you have to consider for all elements. So all elements should satisfy this property. They should be less than or equal. Only then they are part of the lower bound. Okay, let us see understand this with the help of an example. Okay, so this is one of the Hasse diagrams. Okay, now let us try to find the upper and lower bound. Okay, so the first subset, uh, So if you look at the full set is actually A to H, right? But now we are considering some subsets, say A, comma B, comma C. Okay. Now let us first try to find its upper bound. Okay. What is its upper bound? All those elements which are greater than or equal to, means elements of the set can also be part of it. Okay. But the condition is all the elements of subset should be less than them. Okay. For all elements, the relation should hold. Okay. So can you tell me what are the possible nodes or set which will be included in the upper bound? Okay, let's see one by one. Let us consider E. Is E an upper bound for all three of them? For C, it's clearly an upper bound. For A, you can see the relation is like this, so it's clearly an upper bound. For B, it's also an upper bound, right? So E is definitely there. Okay, what else? Can D be considered as an upper bound? For B, it's an upper bound. For A, it's an upper bound. For C, is this an upper bound? D. Remember Hasse diagram, arrows are always towards upwards, right? So is D an upper bound or not? Okay, so let me just, for your convenience, draw the arrows, right? Arrows will always be upward. Okay. Now, if you look at D, D is an upper bound for B for sure. It's also an upper bound for A, but how do you claim it's an upper bound for C? There is no path that which ends on D via C. There's no path. So how can you say they are related? Remember, how are these arrows drawn? These arrows are drawn based on the fact that the ordered pair satisfies the relation, right? So is there possible that C can ever be related to D? It's not possible. You can clearly see from arrow diagram. Even if you have removed the arrows, but there's no relation. If I had an edge this, then C, D was an upper bound for it, right? That's why I mentioned in upper bound definition, you need to remember this criteria that those elements are part of upper bound if they are greater than all elements. Okay, that means they are related to all elements under the given relation. Okay, so is D an upper bound for the set ABC? Yes, class, is D? It is not, right? Okay, so E we found is. What about G? What about G, class? Is this an upper bound? It's also not upper bound for C. For A and B it is, but for C it's not, right? So can you tell me what is the upper bound set for ABC? Sure, Usaid. Okay, so let us see why D is not an upper bound. Okay, so Usaid, if you recall, the last step of Hasse diagram was to remove arrows. Why? Because conventionally we know that all arrows point upwards. Okay, so let's add arrows for our sake of understanding whether there is a relation between pairs or not. Okay, now if we have to see a particular element is an upper bound for other element, it needs to be related to that element. That is, if I say A is covered by D, it means in actual relation there should be a pair A comma D in R. Okay, which is clear here because I have a path from A to D in the Hasse diagram, right? But if you look at the C, is there a path from C to D in the Hasse diagram? So that means, as we know, if you recall, one of the ways to check whether an ordered pair is in a relation or not is to check whether there's a path on the graph from the given pairs, right? So if there's no such path, that means this is not in the relation, right? That means it cannot cover it. Why? Because to cover it, it needs to satisfy all the elements. But for C, D is not related to it under R. Okay, so whatever path you take that will tell you that such ordered pairs are in the relation. Okay, and if you want to count the upper bound, all such possible relations should be there. Okay, is it clear? Similarly for G, if you look at G, there is no path from C to G, right? So it's not a part of it. Okay, now can anyone tell me what should be the upper bound set for ABC? Just rule out one of them. So D we ruled out, G we ruled out, E we included. Till you get practice, do it one by one. Okay, so E is included. Okay, what about F? So F is there. Yes, because all three of them have a path, right, to F. What about J? What about J? Sir, J, do all three ABC have a path to J? Just make the arrows for simplicity till you get hold of this concept. Yes, so J is also there. Similarly, H is also there. Right? Now, can you tell me the lower bound? So lower bound you have to detract. Okay, let us first do all the upper bounds. Okay, then we'll do the lower bound. Okay, tell me now for J and H, what are the upper bounds? Abhi, let's do upper bounds first. Okay, so what are the for J and H? What are the upper bounds? So we need those set of elements which are above J and H, both of them. Is there some element which is above them? No. Excellent. So there is no upper bound set, right? Very good. What about A, C, D, and F? Okay, so now let me just erase this. Okay, so tell me A, C, D, and F. So we have A, C, D, and F. Okay, so definitely B and E cannot be part because they are lower than D and F. I only want something which is above it, right? So what do you think are the upper bound set? Yes, class? Okay, so most people have written the correct. I want others also to try it. Okay, so most people have written two correctly, but there's just one person who has actually written the correct set. Why not F? Okay, why? Remember the condition I had said? That's why I had focused on it, that always remember or equal to is also can be the answer, right? Is F dominating all of them? A, C, and D? Right? So F is also the part, right? Remember the condition. That's why I had stressed on both the conditions. It should dominate all of them and it can also be equal, right? Very good, Abhay. So Abhay cast it. So F, J, and H all are the upper bound. Is it clear why F is also included? Yes, class, is it clear why F is included? Okay, excellent. Now let us move to the lower part, lower bound. Okay. Okay, so I want you to try the lower bound now. So for A, B, C, what is the lower bound? Okay, remember equal to is also allowed and it should be lower than all the elements. So what is the lower bound? Excellent. It's just A. That's it. Right? Because there's nothing below it other than it. Very good. What about J and H? This one is a little tricky. Be careful. Okay. All set of elements which are lower than both of them. So you have to retract path here. Do it carefully. Okay, so Ankita Abe has already written. Okay, excellent. Abe, Ankita, Dhananjay, very good. Okay, so the lower bound, as correctly pointed out by Abe, Ankita, and Dhananjay, is A, B, C, D, E, F. All of them. A, B, C, D, E, F. Why not G? G is not there because J has no path to reach. Excellent. Okay. So I hope now you have got the idea. Okay. What about the lower bound for A, C, D, and F? Lower bound for A, C, D, and F? Very good. It is A. Okay. Okay, so are all three examples clear? I went little slower because it's little new. So is this clear? What is an upper bound? See, most common mistake that students make is they skip this equal to condition. That's why I have been stressing on it. Okay, and this can be tricky because if it's a MCQ type question, they can give you the parts, so that you get trapped. They would have given you a first part itself JH and maybe last part FJH. Okay, so in a hurry, most people just stick this out and unfortunately they get caught, right? That's how examiners make parts, right? They make parts based on your frequently made mistakes. Okay, so I hope none of you will repeat it. Always keep in mind the two conditions in upper bound and lower bound. One is you need to check for all elements, and second is it can also be an equal element. Okay, is this clear to everyone? Yes, is this clear? Okay, excellent. So let us now move to the last part of this Hasse diagram, which actually is the most important part. That's why you studied all these maximal, minimal, least, greatest, upper bound, lower bound. This is what is most important. This has applications, practical applications. That is known as supremum or and infimum. Okay, now let us try to understand what both of them stand for. So a given element x is said to be least upper bound. Okay, so these are contrasting words. Least upper bound or LUB, or it's also known as supremum for a given set A, subset A, if x is an upper bound, that is the first condition, but it is less than every other upper bound. Okay, so in previous slide you saw that there can be a set of upper bounds, like in one of the cases we had all f, j, and h as the upper bound. Okay, now among all the set of upper bounds, which is the least one? That is known as your least upper bound or supremum. Okay, so what is a least upper bound? Element can be a least upper bound if it satisfies two conditions. First, that it should be an upper bound for that set subset. Second is that among all the upper bounds, it should be the least one. Okay. Similarly, the element y is said to be the greatest lower bound or infimum if y is a lower bound, and among all the lower bounds, it is the greatest one. Okay, so little contrasting. Upper bound, you try to look for the least one and it is known as supremum, and lower bound you look at the greatest one and it's known as infimum. Okay, let us test our understanding on the example. Okay, so suppose you have been given the subset b, d, and g, b, d, and g. You need to tell whether the greatest lower bound exists and what is it, whether the least upper bound exists, what is it. Okay, let's not jump the gun. We know that to be a least upper bound, first thing that you need to be is an upper bound. Okay, so let us first find out what are the upper bounds for BDG. Class, what are the upper bound set for BDG? Let's do it step by step. Okay. Upper bound set is excellent. It is G and H, right? We cannot have J because J is not related to G. So it is G and H, right? Now, if you check G and H, which one of them is lower, right? So your least upper bound is G. Okay, now let us try to look at greatest lower bound. So for this, first let us find out what is the lower bound set for this subset. What is the lower bound set for GDB? Excellent. It is A and B, right? All others are not relevant. Okay, now what is the greatest lower bound? Out of A and B, which one is greater? It is B, right? Okay, so this is how you compute supremum and infimum. Okay, I'll discuss its applications at the end, but let me just tell you, like when we compute LCM and HCF, it is also one of the versions of supremum and infimum. That is one of the closest applications we have. Okay, HCF and LCM are a version of supremum and infimum only. Okay, okay, so this basically finishes our orders. Okay, is this clear? Maximal, minimal element, least greatest element, upper bound, lower bound, and supremum, infimum. Is this all clear? See, all of this will come with practice. Okay, I'll also share tutorial and you should also practice on your own. Okay, all right. Okay, so the last special category of ordered set is lattice. Okay, what is a lattice? A lattice is that partially ordered set in which every pair, okay, and every is important, every pair of element has both upper least upper bound and a greatest lower bound. Okay, so other than this, it also has some more properties. Okay, but we are going to skip it here because those properties require understanding of group theory. Okay, we'll come back to this lattices when we study the group theory lecture module. Okay, so this we'll keep for group theory module, but as you go there, you will see a lattice is also a partially ordered set. Okay, that means it is that set on which we define a relation which is reflexive, antisymmetric, and transitive. But in addition to these properties of having the least upper bound and greatest lower bound, it will have some additional properties. Okay, which we'll study in group theory. Okay, so we'll come back to lattices in probably the last module for this course. Okay, so this basically were all what we discussed, whether it was partial order relation, whether it was pre-order, quasi-order, they were all binary relations. Okay, so to conclude the relations topic, in general, you can also have n-ary relations. Okay, so n-ary relation means instead of having two sets, you have n possible sets. So instead of taking Cartesian product of two, you take the Cartesian product of all n sets, right? So what will be the elements of this Cartesian product? Will it be a pair? Will it be a triplet? How will the elements of this Cartesian product look like? N-ary relation? Very good. It will be a n-tuple. Okay. And in general, this for this n-tuple, the sets are known as set domains of this relation, and the number of sets you have taken is known as degree of relation. Okay, so a small case of n-ary is the ternary relation where you have three sets. Okay, so let's see some examples of ternary relations. So if I define a relation R on a set of natural numbers n cross n cross n, where ABC is such that they satisfy this relation. Okay, so 1 2 3 is in this relation, but 2 4 3 is not because they don't satisfy it. So basically you can define relations. You may be given a question that write a ternary relation or write a Pfeifferi relation. So you should know how to develop it. Okay, how do you develop it? First thing is, to develop any n-ary relation, you need to take Cartesian product of that many uh, sets, right? Second thing to note is, every element of it will be a n tuple. Okay, if it is 3, it will be a 3 tuple. If it's 4, it will be a 4 tuple, and so on. Okay. uh, so this is the generalization of n-ary relations. Another example of a ternary relation is betweenness. Okay, so if you have 3 points in a plane, if B point lies between A and C, it's also a ternary relation. It relates 3 points together. Okay, so in general, you can have any possible relations. It's just an extension of your binary relation. Okay, okay, so this basically ends your relation module. Okay, so what we move on to is the last component of this first lecture module. Again, I'll repeat that this is not part of your actual syllabus, but it is very closely related to it. And one of the topics which is in your syllabus, cardinality, is very closely related to it. So we'll just try to quickly skim over it so that we are in a position to understand cardinality better. Okay, so let us start with functions for at least 5-6 minutes, then we'll stop. Okay, so what is a function? Okay, and how do we relate it? Right, like first we studied sets, right, and then we studied relations. Okay, and we saw how sets are related to relations. We define a relation on the Cartesian product of sets. Right, now how do we move from relations to functions? Okay, what is the how do are they related? Anyone? What is the relation? Right, relation we defined as Cartesian product of sets, so we got this connection. Okay, what is the connection between relation and functions? Anyone recalls? How can we build, to have the correct sequence? We first studied sets, then relations. How do we connect now relation with functions? Right, what is this connection? Okay, so what is this connection? Basically, function is also a special kind of relation. Okay, it's not different. The connection is that function is also a relation, but with certain constraints. Right, now let us try to see what are those constraints and how is it a relation itself. Okay, so let A and B be two non-empty sets. We define a function f from A to B, which is normally written like this: a function f from A to B, as an assignment of exactly one element of B to each element of A. Okay, so this is a constraint that I mentioned. Okay, you're going to define a relation only between two sets A and B, but the constraint is exactly one element of B should be mapped to each element of A, right? Which we normally write like this: f of A is equal to B, but what we want is B should be a unique element of capital B or set B, right? So what we don't want is a situation where B is not unique. Okay, so that is the only constraint which defines a function. Okay, we can define relation between two sets, any possible relations, but those relations where we have exactly one element of B mapped to each element of A, such kind of special relations are known as functions. Okay, and they are sometimes also called as mappings or transformations. Okay, so what is a function? A function from A to B is actually a relation from A to B, that is, it will be a subset of AB, such that each A belongs to a unique ordered pair AB. Okay, so A, for each element A, there should be a unique ordered pair B. If it's not unique, then it's not a valid function. Okay, so in general, when we say there's a function from f from A to B, so when we can write it as f of A, where function f takes the values from set A and what it returns will be a value from B, right? And we know there are certain definitions associated with it. The set A, okay, from which you define the function, as we know, it's known as domain, and the set B, complete set B, is known as codomain. Okay, for a given relation A comma B in the function, A is known as pre-image and B is known as image. Okay, the third definition is about range. Range is set of all images. Okay, and it is a subset of domain, right? Is it true? It is a subset of domain. Is range a subset of domain? Sleeping class? Yes? No. No, I was just testing you. Range is a subset of codomain, right? Range cannot be subset of domain. Yeah. So range is subset of domain. It is those elements which are mapped to some element of A, right? So there are various notions or definitions by which we can represent functions, right? Sometimes we can have directly write, say, f of x is equal to some function, say x square, right? Sometimes we replace f of x by y. Okay, in such scenarios, x is known as your independent variable, right? But y is a dependent variable because it depends on it. Okay, so all these are very classical things in functions, what we all already know. Okay, so to summarize, what we have is we have a function which is nothing but a special relation where we have a unique element of B mapped to each element of A, right? Okay, so let us just quickly revisit our concept of range, codomain, domain. Okay, so suppose I have a function f from A to B where A and B are defined as follows, and the mapping is also as follows. Okay, so I have A, B, C, D. I have R, S, T, U. I have f of A is S, f of B is U, f of C is R, f of D is S. Okay, is this a valid function? Why, Tanya, it's not a valid function? Every element is uniquely mapped to one. See, in function, we don't want this. First element should not be common to two ordered pairs. This is when we say function is not valid, right? But this is allowed. Is it clear, Tanya? I'm sure the confusion arose because of this, right? This is a valid function, right? We only want, recall the definition, we only want that each A first element should belong to a unique ordered pair. You cannot have two ordered pairs which start with same A. Okay, that is not a valid function. Okay, so what are the domain, codomain, range of this function? What is the domain? Domain is simple, A, B, C, D. What is the range? Codomain is also simple. Domain is this, codomain is this. What is the range? Very good. T is missing, all others are mapped. Okay. Let us move to next example. Let f be a function that assigns last two bits of a bit string of length 2 or greater to that string. Okay, so f is a function which assigns last two bits of a string whose length is greater than equal to 2 to it. Okay, so we have a string and f function maps it to the last two bits. Like if I have f11010, it maps it to the last two bits. Can you tell me what is the domain for this? Did you understand the function? You will be given strings. which have length 2 or any greater than 2. It could be 9, 10, 11, infinity, anything. But what it is going to do, not infinity, some finite number, it's going to map them to the last two bits, right? Like if I have 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, it will map it to 1, 1, right? If I have, say, f 0, 1, 0, 1, what will be the answer? What will be the answer of this mapping? 0, 1, 0, 1. Last two bits, okay? 0, 1. Okay, what about this? What about this? What about f of 1? No, this is not defined, right? Because look at the condition. Last two bits of a bit string which has length 2 or greater than 2. Okay, so our input should itself be 2, minimum 2 or greater than 2. Okay, or f of 0, 1, it will be directly 0, 1 because minimum is 2, so it will return 2. Right? Now, can you tell me what will be the domain? What is the domain of this function? What is the input? Domain means input. What input can we give to the function? So I'm just trying to use contrasting examples, so that you get the concept of domain. What is the domain for such kind of function? What kind of inputs can you give? I gave 2 length, 3 length, 4 length, 5 length. Excellent. Domain is all strings which have length of greater than or equal to 2. Excellent. What about codomain? Or let's first think of range. What about range? Little bit think, stress out yourself, what could be the possible answer? Excellent, Abhay. Excellent, Abhay. Very good. Okay, so range is specific, right? Since it's going to map everything to just 2 bits, there are 4 possible combinations of 2 bits. Can I have any other combination? No, right? So only possible combinations are 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. Right? What about codomain? Codomain is also same, right? Because all possible combinations are just this much, right? Is this example clear? Right? Domain is all strings. Range is the all possible combinations of 2 bits. If I had, instead of 2, if I had 3 bits, so how many combinations I would have in domain or range? Very good. From 0, 0, 0 to all the way till 1, 1, 1. Okay, so all those 8 combinations would be there. Okay, is this clear, class? This example is clear? Yes. Excellent. So let us do the last example and then we'll move to tutorials. Okay, what are the domain, codomain, range if a function assign grades to the students? Okay, so there's a function which takes input as students and gives grades to them. Right? What is the domain? Yes, what will be the domain for this kind of setup? Ask quickly, I have to discuss tutorial. What will be the domain? No, no, uh, it assigns grades. Yeah, it will be students, right? Domain is the input one, right? What will be the codomain? And what will be the range? See, codomain will be your all possible grades. Yeah, A, B, C, D, whatever grades are. Range would be those grades which the students have obtained, right? I mean, it's a simple question, but it's just that I wanted to show you versatility. Okay, somewhere you may be given directly the function and the sets. Somewhere the function or sets may not be evident. You have to define them based on situation. Okay, so I'll stop there. Hopefully, next class we'll finish up with this. We'll discuss functions and then cardinality and application, practical application of these sets, relations, and functions. Okay, so let me stop sharing. All right, class, is this Jamboard visible to everyone? So what I'll move next, as I had mentioned, today I'll be discussing tutorial 1 solutions quickly. Is this visible? Jamboard is visible to everyone? Okay, great. Okay, so let us quickly go through these solutions of the questions. Okay, so first question was, list the elements of the following set if universal set is alphabet. Okay, set A is X such that X is a letter in the word Little. Okay, so what is the possible solution for this? Okay, two things you had to keep in mind. One, that elements belong to little, but main thing you have to keep in mind is like T is twice. Okay, so it should not be repeated. So what is the answer to this? What is the set A? Excellent. Excellent. A, it is LITE, or I mean any order is preferable. I can also write it in terms of alphabetic order or any order, right? But the important thing is you don't write T twice. Okay. Next question is, X precedes F in the alphabet. Okay. So all the letters which precede X in the alphabet. So it is A, B, C, D, E. Okay. Very simple. Okay. Okay. Now we need to write set builder notation to these sets. It is 3, 6, 9, 12. It's multiples of 3, right? So there are multiple possible correct answers. So if I write one answer, don't think that yours is wrong. Yours can also be correct. So I can write it as follows. Okay, I can write it as say 3a, such that a is an integer, or what was the range. I can also keep it as natural number or integer, both are valid, and I can give it a range. It is from 0 to, what was the last one, 12. So it is from 0 to 4. Okay, so this can be one possible answer. Other possible answer is you don't write a is in natural numbers, you just give the range. That's also correct. Instead of natural numbers, you use a superset of it like integers. That is also correct. Okay, next is what it is, -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. So here I cannot use natural numbers. I have to definitely use integers, right? So -3 to 3. So again, I can write it as, either I can write it as a multiple of 3. Oh, so I can write it as X, okay, where X is in integers, and I can give the range, what X belongs to. Right, any issues, class? I'm just skimming through it because I assume this is known. Anywhere you have doubts, please stop me. Okay, so this is question 2. What about question 3? Okay, question 3 states, let me just write it here. Okay, first part is X belongs to X. Second is X is subset of X. Third is X is belongs to X. Fourth is X belongs to set of X. Fifth is empty set is subset of X. And last is it is a member of X. Okay, so you have to say what all is true and what all is false. Okay, so which one of them are true? Okay, so for this you need to know two things. One is, this is a membership operator. Okay, means if I write A is element of A, it should be a element of it, or we can say the member of it, right? But when I write subset, then I mean that all the elements which are on this side should be elements of this side, right? So if I write X is a member of X, it's true because by curly braces is a set notation. So this is definitely true, right? What about the second one? Every set is subset of itself, so this is also true. Okay, what about this? Is X a member of this? Okay, this is not true. This is false because it's not an element. It to be an element, this with its curly braces should be part of this set, right? Like you can see in this case. What is this? This is true, right? Because X with the curly braces is a member of this set. Okay. Similarly, what about this? This is also trivially true because every phi or empty set is subset of every set. And what about this? This is false because empty set is not member of any set, right? Okay. Next is cardinality. So you have phi and then you have phi's in brackets. Okay. So first one is phi. So what is the cardinality of phi? Yeah. So cardinality of phi we know is 0. Second was, I guess, phi. Let me just quickly write it. Okay. Okay, what is the cardinality of this? As I had mentioned when we had discussed cardinalities, don't count what is the content. Just see how many elements are there. Okay, so since phi is itself an element, so it's 1. Here, if you count, okay, comma separating each elements, what is the cardinality of third? It's 2. And here, if you count, it is 3. Right? But what is special about it? Any relation that you see of all these, among all these 4 parts? Yes, because any relation that you see among all the 4 parts? Yes, they are power sets of each other, right? Okay, so you can see how power sets are related to it. I mean, at least not all of them is most of them. So power set of I is this, right? So the last was, yes, fifth question was prove the following using the specific techniques. Okay, so first part was that you need to prove. You need to prove A minus B is equal to A intersection B. A minus B is equal to A intersection B. But you were given you need to prove it by showing they are subsets of each other. Okay. So first you need to show that A minus B is subset of A intersection B complement. Okay. How do you show it? How do you show this class? You first take an element, say X, which belongs to A minus B. Okay. If I say X belongs to A minus B, what does it mean? Yes, it means that X belongs to A, right? If I say and X does not belong to B, right? Now, if I say X does not belong to B, then where does it belong? It belongs to B complement, right? If it does not belong to B, given the universal set, it belongs to B complement, right? Now, if you combine it, A and B complement, it means A belongs to A comma B complement. Okay, so you showed that if X belongs to A minus B, it belongs to A complement intersection B as well. Okay, so time is already over. Do you have a class immediately after it? I just require 5 minutes. Is your CR around? Uh, Class, do you have a class immediately after it? I just want to finish the solution discussion. Do you have it just at 11 itself? Okay. Okay, then I'll stop. Maybe we'll discuss it in the next class, the remaining parts. All right.